Hey guys, what's going on? Again, it's me, Jay, here to talk some more about the Vince McMahon scandal that is going on right now in the world of professional wrestling. Something that is shocking a lot of people. Now, I initially made another video about this when the story first broke, but I really didn't know. That video was more about why Vince McMahon resigned from TKO, the board of directors, right? This one is more about what I found out as I learned more about the case and how Vince McMahon manipulated and how he cajoled and he mind fucked basically this young vulnerable girl. So the story starts back in 2020. Her parents both have died. She's moved into an apartment complex next. Hey again, Lisa. She's moved into an apartment complex next to Vince McMahon. Now, keep in mind, I said her parents both have died. She's struggling to pay the rent on this apartment complex. Apparently, her name is Janelle Gray. Janelle Grant. Uh, um, Her parents both have passed away. I guess her parents were kind of wealthy because she's living next to a billionaire, right, Vince? So Vince gets to know her. He comes over to her. He comes over to her house. He knocks on her door. He makes himself known. He invites her over, so she thinks nothing of it. She's like 33, 32 years old. He's a 78-year-old man. So when she shows up at his house, what does he immediately do? He shows up in his underwear. He comes out of she's sitting on his couch, and here he is in his underwear looking at this girl, repeatedly asking the girl for hugs and hugs. And the girl feels kind of weirded out, but at the same time, she needs this job. He offers her a job at the WWE. Now, keep in mind, she has no experience with wrestling. She knows nothing about wrestling. But he says, "Don't worry, you'll work for me." So she goes into the WWE with this unspecified title. You know what I mean? And her and Vince are getting closer. So little by little, Vince starts buying her gifts. He starts buying her things. He buys her a luxury car. He buys her this and that. And then before you know it, Vince propositions her for sex. Now, she doesn't want to have sex with Vince. She looks at him like he's a grandfatherly figure. But he starts to tell his story. He starts to tell his story about how he grew up in a trailer park, how he was molested by his mom and his stepfather. He starts to sympathize with her. He starts to play with her mind, basically. And then he zooms in for the kill and he has sex with her. Now, initially, this sex is consensual, but little by little, as their relationship starts to become more and more serious, keep in mind he's buying her gifts, he's taking her out to places, he's now separated from his wife Linda, he's putting her on a pedestal. So then he says to her, "I want you to meet somebody, a business associate of mine, John Laurinaitis." Now, John Laurinaitis, the head of the head of talent relations in the WWE, Animal's brother from the Road Warriors, married to the Bella's mother, a married man now, just like Vince. And Vince drops a bombshell shell on her that he wants to have a threesome with him, John Laurinaitis, and this girl. She says no. Vince then goes in to kiss the girl. He kisses the girl, and then he and John Laurinaitis proceed to take turns holding this girl down while the other one penetrates her. And this is in the offices of WWE with the doors locked. And she's screaming, "No, no, no, no." And he Vince McMahon. The same thing that years ago in the 80s, he told that female referee, Rita Chatterton, we talked about it one time in another video. He told her the exact same words, and this is how I know it's true. He said to her, he looked her in the eye and he said to her, "No means yes." And he and Laurinaitis continued to take turns basically aping this young woman. Then, that wasn't the end of it. As she threatened to go to the police, he then told her that he would fire her. He would throw her out of the apartment complex. He would take away all her assets because he texted her, "I own you. And if I want you to fuck another guy, you're going to fuck another guy. And you're going to fuck whoever I want you to fuck because I own you," he told her. "And if I want to sell you, I'll sell you." So now he's breaking her down psychologically before he was building her up psychologically. Now, she's all distraught. She feels like she can't leave Vince. You know what I mean? She feels like she has nowhere to go. And not only that, he's texting her, telling her that he is showing her pictures to everyone in the offices of WWE. He even showed it to a referee who proceeded to go to the back room. They don't name the referee's name because if they did, us loyal wrestling fans, we would probably know who this is because a lot of us know who the referees are and stuff. But this referee proceeds to take Vince's phone with the girl's pictures on him and go into the back room closet at the arena and masturbate. And Vince comes back and says, "You have made a young man very happy," to Janelle. So anyway, as the relationship goes on, Vince then tells her he has somebody else besides John Laurinaitis. She continues to do it with John Laurinaitis, and John Laurinaitis' response after it was very, very strange. He hugged the girl like 3 or 4 times, told her thank you, thank you, thank you. And then afterwards, after the episode was over, proceeded to text her and tell her how good it was. So Vince is going to his physical therapist now. And he wants this girl to have yet another threesome with the physical therapist now. And she wants to back out, and she says, "No, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. Please, Vince, don't make me do it. Don't." He says, "If you don't do it again, I will expose you. I'll expose these photos that I have of you. I'll expose you as a prostitute. I'll blackmail you," telling her all this kinds of crazy stuff. "You must have sex with this physical therapist." So she has sex with the physical therapist and Vince at the same time. And Vince proceeds to defecate, to take a dump on Janelle's face while they're having this threesome. And after he does this, the therapist continues to have sex with her. Vince goes to the bathroom and cleans up while he tells Janelle to lay there with his feces on her face while she's having sex with another man. It doesn't end there. As many people recall, Brock Lesnar was I made a video when Brock Lesnar first left the WWE. He left in 2020 after the match with Drew McIntyre at WrestleMania 36, right? And he didn't come back, and there was speculation that he might go to AEW, he might go to UFC, which was a separate company at that time. But Vince really wanted him to come back. So what does he do? He promises her to Brock Lesnar. He promises her body to Brock Lesnar if he comes back to the WWE. And to entice Brock Lesnar in the contract, what does he do? He sends Brock Lesnar a videotape that he recorded on his phone. a videotape that he recorded on his phone. Exactly, Lisa. A videotape that he recorded on his phone of her urinating for Brock Lesnar. And the promise of having sex with her and the urine tape is what apparently convinced Brock Lesnar to make his return to WWE at SummerSlam 2022. Because we recall when Vince resigned last year in July, Brock Lesnar walked out of the company. So he and Vince have this special kind of relationship where he knows about it. Furthermore, Vince would, and we talked about this in the last video, he would use sex toys, dildos, in which he would name the black dildo after black wrestlers like Bobby Lashley and the white dildo after certain white wrestlers. And he shoved them so hard up her vagina that it even injured her vagina. And still, even after she was injured, he still forced her to have sex with every man that worked at the WWE offices, especially John Laurinaitis. And what would he do? He would schedule her out different days. Like, you're going to see John Laurinaitis on Tuesday. You're going to see Brock Lesnar on Wednesday. You're going to see the physical therapist on Thursday. You're going to, he was basically pimping her out throughout this whole ordeal for the last 2 years. And on top of that, on top of all of that, Vince was even beating her up physically, harming her physically, and destroying her mentally. Because when she would refuse to say no, it's right there in the text messages. He would say, "You're a bitch. You're a stupid bitch." And he would break her down through manipulation, trying to rule her. He would make her grovel on the floor on all fours and do humiliating stuff and bark like a dog, just so she could be at his mercy. By the end of it, she claims that she was physically, mentally, and emotionally broken by Vince. What Vince did is inexcusable, guys. Vince's actions are inexcusable. And people at WWE claim they don't know that Vince was doing this. They claim they have no recollection of what he was doing. But keep in mind, even though it's fake, even though it's a TV show, wrestling, the character of Vince McMahon, the character of Mr. McMahon, did a lot of the same things on TV that he did actually in real life. Remember, he had the Kiss My Ass Club. He had Trish Stratus barking like a dog. He had wrestlers defecating on each other, urinating on each other on his shows before. He's had incest storylines. He proposed a storyline where he got his daughter, Stephanie McMahon, pregnant, and when she turned it down, he proposed another storyline where his son, Shane, got her pregnant, and she also turned that down. He's had storylines where Triple H made love to a dead corpse that was supposedly Kane's girlfriend. You got to think of the mind of the man that is writing this stuff. This isn't just fun and games. This was for real. This was how this man thought. You know what I mean? A perfect example of how Vince thinks. There's a story about him. I saw it on Rene Dupree's podcast. Rene Dupree, former tag team member of La Resistance, a French anti-American team in the early 2000s during the Iraq War. France wasn't they didn't support us in the Iraq War. So basically Vince's idea was, we're going to turn against the French now, our oldest ally in American history. But anyway, he was talking about an incident that Pat Patterson had told him about, that Vince did at Vince's house when they would write the TV shows, where Vince had a dog and he would show a milk bone to this dog, and he would show the milk bone to the dog and tease the dog and make the dog grovel for the milk bone. And Rene Dupree said that's exactly what he would do to his wrestlers. That's exactly what he would do to his girlfriends. He would make them grovel. He would make them beg. He would um he loved the fact that he had power over them. A lot of times he would do that, like when a wrestler would leave the WWE and then they would come back begging for their job, he just screw them over. You know what I mean? Because he could, because he's Vince McMahon, damn it. He's the chairman of the WWE. You know what I mean? He felt like he had power over the people that he controlled. And that's just like with this girl. The fact that this girl was vulnerable, the fact that her parents had just died, the fact that she had no job, the fact that she was younger, the fact, and this one is something that a lot of people are overlooking. She is almost the exact age, if not a little bit younger than Vince's own daughter, Stephanie. And I've always had this suspicion that Vince, in his sick and twisted mind, fantasizes about his own daughter, Stephanie. You know, because this girl, look at a picture of Stephanie, brownish hair, a white girl, young, very similar, a very similar build. I mean, if you go exactly, if you go back to, it's an episode in 2002. It's the storyline. It's on Raw. It's a storyline where Vince he's a lot like Trump in that way. At least Trump also fantasizes about Ivanka. Says that if Ivanka wasn't his daughter, he'd get with her. But it's an episode. It's 2002. Vince. It's the wedding episode. Stephanie McMahon wants to get back together with Triple H on camera. So she's lying about being pregnant. And she tells him a week before that she says, I'm pregnant. So they're going to have the wedding on Raw, right? So she's in a real wedding dress with cleavage showing and everything. And of course, Vince is walking her out. But as Vince is walking her out, Vince is looking at her tits. As he's walking his own daughter out, he's looking at her breast. Like the sickness of this man. And I'll call you guys to another storyline. Remember, one of the most famous storylines in WWE history. Now, I know these are just storylines, but who's writing these storylines? Who's approving these storylines? Vince. Who's starring in these storylines? Vince. Just like R. Kelly's songs, when we talked about R. Kelly, we could see the truth through some of our songs. We could read in between the lines. So this just like here. There's another story, this other storyline. Vince's wife, in real life at that time, Linda McMahon, was in a coma, right? So while she was in a coma, he was carrying on a relationship with his aide, Trish Stratus, another female wrestler. And he would hump Trish Stratus in front of Linda. He would bring Linda's comatose body in the wheelchair out to flaunt his relationship in front of his half comatose wife, Linda. And even during the match he had with his son Shane, the street fight at WrestleMania 17, he even brought Linda out and flaunted it in front of her. So there. And if that's not enough, if you don't need that, let's take a real life case. Rita Chatterton. I talked about it earlier and I talked about it in another video, but I'll reiterate it here. A female referee that was working for the WWE in the 80s. And Vince tells her, I don't want you messing around with none of the other boys, none of the wrestlers, because you get yourself in trouble. So she's like, oh, Vince is looking out for me. But again, that's just like with this girl. That's how he sets her up. He gains her confidence first, and he rapes her. And he tells her the exact same words he told this girl. Yes means no means yes. And he proceeds to rape her right in the car. Sexually assault her, ape her rather, right in the car. A pattern a pattern. Boca Raton, Florida, allegedly in 2006, the same thing. Let's not forget, people focus on 30 years ago, the steroid scandal, the steroid distribution scandal, where Vince almost went to jail and he took on the federal government. That's one thing, because that was whether or not he and Linda knew about this Doctor Zaharian that was selling the wrestlers their candies, as it were. We don't know. He was acquitted on that. But one thing they didn't bring to um, to to the forefront in that trial was the sexual misconduct in the WWE, the molestation and the pedophilia that went on with the ring boys. And there were certain male fans that became ring boys that were molested by certain agents that in the WWE, such as Terry Garvin and Mel Phillips. Mel Phillips, who had a foot fetish, would look at 10-year-old boys' feet and want to tickle them. Terry Garvin, another close employee of the WWE, was watching a porn with a 12-year-old boy and to ask him, does his girlfriend do this to him? And then he would do that to him. Or sexual assault, sexual harassment lawsuits that occurred that mentioned to certain female wrestlers and male wrestlers that if they didn't sleep with certain high-end level employees at the WWE, uh, that they would be that would be their job, or they wouldn't get promotions. And this happened to Randy Orton's uncle Barrio, a second generation star in the wrestling business. So, I mean, these are not. I'll send you a clip, Lisa, of Vince McMahon on the Phil Donahue show in 1992. Defending this, saying this didn't happen. But it was a well-known case. Why? Because they got rid of Mel Phillips, they got rid of Terry Garvin, and they got rid of Pat Patterson for a while. Now, Pat Patterson, people say, oh, he was Vince's closest friend. He was his best friend, Pat Patterson, an openly gay man. He died in 2020, the first intercontinental champion in WWE history in 1979. Right? He was openly gay, and there's nothing wrong with being openly gay. That was his sexuality, whatever. He lived with his partner Louis Dondero for years before losing him to cancer. There's no problem with that, being openly gay, but the problem arises when you try to use sex to get a wrestler to do what they want to do. Now they say he was unfairly let go, and that's why they brought him back a couple of years later, and he stayed with the company until he passed, working on the creative side with Vince. But there are stories that even before the WWE, that he sexually molested Roddy Piper in the 1970s when they worked together in the San Francisco territory. So Pat Patterson would, if not sexually molest some of the younger wrestlers, he would say things that were inappropriate to younger male wrestlers. And Vince would do the exact same thing with a lot of the female wrestlers and even some of the male wrestlers. Allegedly, there was an altercation where Vince was attacked in 1992 again by one of his wrestlers, Kevin Wackles, who played the character of Nails the Convict. He was in a feud with the Big Boss Man in the latter part of 1992. And he was having a pay dispute with Vince. And all of a sudden, he went into Vince's office. Vince told him, I'm not paying you that amount of money or whatever. And Vince allegedly tried to come on to him and touched his penis. And you can hear Kevin Wackles scream, he touched my dick, he touched my dick. And he tried to choke Vince out. You know what I mean? So there is sexual assault in the WWE of minors, of grown men, of grown women, of yeah, Lisa was saying, see what I say? Wrestlers wear tidy whitey underwear in the ring as a costume, and they are weird. That was probably Vince's idea. Yeah, probably it was. And with the women, Ashley Massaro, a female wrestler who she was on Survivor the Survivor, the TV show Survivor, China edition, and then she switched to wrestling. She started in the mid 2000s. She alleged that when they were on tour in Iraq, Vince McMahon sexually assaulted her, and it resulted uh, in her suicide death. Not so long after, like a decade or so after, you know, and her family never took action. So Vince has sexually assaulted plenty, and I'm sure there's going to be more. There's going to be more wrestlers, male and female, that are going to come out and say that Vince did something to them, or somebody that worked in the WWE has done something to him. Truly, Vince McMahon is an evil and vile human being. You know what I mean? And people could say, well, why do you still watch his product? You know what I mean? Why do you support him even though? And people, and their excuse could be, well, it's under new management, right? They're under. He's 78 years old, at least. It's under new management, right? Because Area Manual. But here's the thing: this when Vince resigned from the company in 2022, in July of 2022, he was brought back by Area Manual and TKO Holdings when they merged with the UFC. That was the whole point of the merger and the buyout, so he could come back. So Area Manual knew about Vince's allegations. The people in WWE knew about the allegations when they brought him back, but they didn't care. They swept it under the rug for almost from July of 2022 till now. He made the woman sign non-disclosure agreements about this, right? He paid her off $2.3 million to not speak about it. But now that the non-disclosure agreements are up, now she's speaking about it. But my point is, the people at the new company, TKO, knew about it. Then they put Vince on the board of directors. The interview that Area Manual did when Vince had the mustache, they all knew because it happened before, but they just didn't care because they knew that his likeness would help felicitate the sale. You know what I mean? Because he was so popular being the face of the WWE. And something was up. It was believed by some because, and known by some because Stephanie McMahon, his daughter, walked out. She walked out of the company. She left the company in 2022 after it happened. And then his son also left the company, but then came back at WrestleMania where he got injured, tore his quad, and Snoop Dogg had to take his place in that match. But I'm saying he's not working closely with WWE now. And of course, his close associates and friends like Bruce Pritchard and people that work closely in his inner circle, they knew about it. You know what I mean? You can't tell me the people in the WWE did not know, and people in TKO and the UFC, even part of it, did not know that Vince McMahon does this. That he's a freak. It's just like Diddy. These rumors were always floating around. But with Vince, it was even more egregious because here he had he had the ability, because wrestling is fake, he had the ability to create a character on television that was fake and do all kinds of outrageous, crazy things. And just say, oh, I'm just playing a character on TV. I'm not really like that. I'm just playing that, that's just my character, Mr. McMahon. I'm not really like that. And his character was a reflection of who he really was. This pervert, this manipulator, this controller, this megalomaniac, this guy who believes that he's bisexual apparently. He likes men and women, but he can use his money and his power and his influence to make people do things sexually, to make people all kinds of perverted things, all kinds of thoughts, all kinds of actions. And the fact that he didn't pay on the non-disclosure agreement after he stopped paying on the agreement that he told the girl to sign is proof of how shady of a business person he is. We talked about in many videos in the 80s, right, when he was buying up all the other territories, because he comes out of the New York territory and he buys up all the other territories, Fritz von Erich in Texas and all that. But two of the biggest ones was Los Angeles and Calgary, Alberta, Canada, where Bret Hart's father was the in charge. Vince paid them. He agreed to buy them out, and he only paid them a little bit of money, and then he stopped paying them. He only paid them half. Same thing in Los Angeles. He only paid the guy half. So that's how Vince is. He feels like, okay, I'll pay him for a while, and then I got to stop paying him. Well, this time, the time's up. He stopped paying on this lawsuit. He stopped paying on a non-disclosure agreement, whatever he owed this girl. Now the girl's coming out and she's spilling the beans. And I'm sure there's plenty of others. Look forward to this being like a Bill Cosby situation. And I hope it is. Because if it isn't, that'll reveal the racial double standard of this country. If they bring the hate on Bill Cosby like they should have if it was true about Bill Cosby, and Bill Cosby even went to jail, then Vince McMahon should go to jail. If not, you can't sit there and tell me that white privilege doesn't exist. Because, are you serious? As crazy as the allegations are against Bill Cosby, the allegations against Vince are even crazier. They're crazier than Harvey Weinstein. They're crazier than Michael Jackson. They're the craziest shit I've ever heard of as far as abuse of power in an executive position. Now, as crazy as the Diddy, but he's a white man. So if he gets a pass, that's a racial double standard right there. You know what I mean? Bring this is a civil suit, but bring this to criminal trial. Bring this to criminal trial. Granted, Lisa said crazier than R. Kelly. What he did was crazier than R. Kelly. I mean, R. Kelly's shit was minors, so that's a little bit more legality. This girl was of age, and that's what Vince has crazy. Vince has this one lawyer that works from Jerry McDivitt that has worked for him for years. They might try to bring that up. You know what I mean? That the girl wasn't a minor, that she was in her early 20s. She did have consent. But at the same time, consent can only go so far. When you're manipulating somebody, a lot of times people say, well, like, somebody will say, well, the person wanted it, right? Like, the abuser will say, well, they wanted it. But you use psychological manipulation. You use fear. So the consent is invalid because you used coercion. You used money. So even though they consented, it still doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Because they consented, but they really didn't consent. It's just like Andrew Tate. He used the lover boy method. That's basically what Vince did. He love bombed. He bought her gifts. He made her feel validated. He opened up about his life, which his life is crazy because he did a Playboy interview, just like R. Kelly, in a way. He did a Playboy interview where he talked about how he was sexually abused by his own mother when he was a child, because this was around the time WWE was expanding. This was like 1984-ish. And the interviewer in Playboy asked him, so you're saying that there was abuse in your family of a sexual nature? Are you saying it was of the male member of your family? Because Vince had a stepfather up until he was 15 years old. He didn't connect with his real father until he was 15. His real father was too busy running WWE, right? And he only hooked up with his mother while he was serving in World War II and kind of just left him in the Carolinas. And they teased Vince all the time. Originally, he went by the name of Vinnie Lupton. That's why Vince hates the South. Vince despises the South and despises Southerners because when he was a kid, all they did was when he lived in the South was pick on him, and his stepfather abused him. So anyway, he's saying, you mean to say you got abused by your stepfather, right? He says, no, not by my stepfather, by my mother. He revealed this in the Playboy interview. So he got abused. And then there's another incident where, during his childhood, where he went with his older brother, Rod, to the movies. And uh, Rod went on a double date with an older girl, and the older girl started masturbating Vince, and Vince was like 11 or 12 years old. So when people start to say things like this, start to reveal crazy details about their life like this, like R. Kelly did, or like Michael Jackson did in the Martin Bashir interview, where he talks about how his brothers were on tour and he watched them have sex with girls and he had to just lay there and be quiet. You're like, okay, this person was introduced to sex in a very unhealthy way. So this is why they behave like that. No excuse, because we all have our own agency, but hurt people, guys. You know what I mean? So Vince was hurt. And on top of that, his relationship with his mother probably influenced his hatred or his misogyny of women, because Vince is very misogynistic. If you look at the way he treats his female wrestlers on camera, as well as how he treats them backstage, how he wouldn't give Rockin' Robin a raise, even though she drew just as much as Hulk Hogan for the first WrestleMania, how he calls his female employees bitches, how he calls Janelle Grant a bitch, tries to degrade her. It's because of his relationship with his mother was so toxic that he doesn't respect women, and because his mother didn't stick up for him when he was being abused by his stepfather, physically beaten up every day. And this is why, too, Vince works out a lot. Vince is a muscle freak, a steroid freak. He worked out just as much as his wrestlers. I remember when he first wrestled Stone Cold Steve Austin on that first Raw in 98. I'm expecting to see this old, frail announcer that we've been watching for years pose as an announcer. The motherfucker's built like one of his wrestlers, man. He's in great shape, a great physical specimen, because he vowed that he would never get beaten up again. And here's another thing that ties into Vince's childhood: his racism. During the text message exchange with Janelle Grant, Vince says that he would like to see Janelle Grant get taken, quote unquote, by 3 black penises in all her holes as he watches. Because in his mind, black men are animals, he says in the text message. Now, if that's not saying all that needs to be said about the way that Vince McMahon looks at African Americans and African American wrestlers and talent, I don't know what is. I mean, he grew up on the segregated side of town in South Carolina. His grandfather on his father's side was a slave owner, and I'm sure among those people he was bullied by were probably African American kids as well. So he feels like he needs to dominate black wrestlers and dominate black people. And by making them have sex with his wife or his girlfriend while he watches, that's a form of domination. We see that with sicko, cuckolded guys like Adam 22. That's a sexual perversion. So he's not only dominating the girl and expressing his misogynistic tendencies, but he's also dominating the guy by making a black man have sex, forcing a black man to have sex with his wife through cuckoldry. And then saying that they're animals. Black people are animals. So a lot of Vince's childhood is reflected in this case. And it makes it very hard to watch the WWE after this. I mean, I know he's gone. I know WrestleMania is coming. We all get excited for WrestleMania, even though the main event has now changed because CM Punk is out of the main event. He tore his tricep at the Royal Rumble and announced on Raw that he is no longer I'm going to wrestle Seth Rollins, so now they're going to probably switch to Gunther and Seth Rollins, whatever. He'll be out for 6 or 7 months. But still, we get excited for WrestleMania. It's a tradition for us as wrestling fans. We love the wrestling, but just like Chris Benoit, just like somebody like R. Kelly's music, just like the Cosby Show, just like Michael Jackson's music, if you believe the allegations or what, it becomes hard to enjoy and separate the entertainment product from the person, especially when the product is so much influenced by the person. You know, when the person's personal ideas are so interjected into the product. It's not like he's like Jimmy Salvo. For many that don't know, Jimmy Salvo was a British personality that um, would interact with sick kids, and then come to find out he was molesting them. You know, it's a crisis of conscience. It really is. You know what I mean? I'm sure Catholics probably went through this when the Catholic Church scandals came out. Will people be able to walk away from WWE? Me personally, I don't know, man. I'm conflicted. I'm a huge WWE fan. I love the WWE. I've loved it since I was 9 years old. But I'm very conflicted, you know, because I know that people in the WWE supported him. People in the WWE abated him. People in the WWE looked out for him in the same way that they tried to cover up some of Bill Cosby's shit. Anyway, peace. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell button to see my next videos coming out. Love you guys.